hobbits are habits. Mordor's in the cerebellum, and that's the realm of all fear and hatred and crime and murder. And Sauron is AI. So the eye that's always looking for the One Ring, that's straight out of Alan Turing's 1936 paper on computable numbers. That's the scanner eye looking for the One Ring. Tolkien uses 3 very, very famous papers from Alan Turing, because he followed Alan Turing's career very closely.
We underestimate just how important J.R.R. Tolkien really is. At best, we consider him to be one of the great fantasy writers and a spreader of Christian ideals. And at worst, we consider him to be a self-indulgent storyteller who wrote meandering entertainment that Hollywood refined to make solid movies. My guest, Paul List, has spent years showing people that Tolkien is so much more, that Tolkien is the very founder of the movement to stop the proliferation of artificial intelligence, in fact responsible for instilling culture with a healthy aversion to the idolization of thinking machines. Tolkien, according to List, is not just the creator of myths that act as Trojan horses for Christianity, but a true prophet who foresaw the power of computers and the risk of a coming technological singularity. In Paul List's estimation, Tolkien's contribution to literature serves as a moral warning against the use of machines to achieve immortality by creating a false heaven on earth. Tolkien's prophecy has infiltrated culture, and his fans are his unknowing disciples. Tolkien started a silent revolution, one that was purposefully hidden until this moment in history. In this interview, Paul List will reveal to us all of its secrets. Paul List, what spy training did J.R.R. Tolkien have?
Well, a lot of people don't know, and it's not widely known, obviously, is that in 1939, J.R.R. Tolkien was recruited by the British government to be part of a top-secret code-cracking team called the Government Code and Cipher School, and they were tasked with the mission to try to crack the Germans' Enigma machine, which was probably their most popular, most famous one everybody knows about, ciphering machine, which scrambled the German language, or any language, depending what you're typing in, scrambled it into literally almost an infinite number of possible ciphers. And then the machine on the other end, be it in a U-boat or a Luftwaffe or some, unit out on the front lines or whatever, would receive the radio signal, type it in the same way that they heard it, and the machine that was set up that they had, it would be set up the same way, and lo and behold, it would come out unscrambled, deciphered. And it was really powerful, and it was at the backbone. It was really the backbone of their secure information and communication systems for a very wide, large front of war. So it was really critical. So very wisely, before Hitler got to England, the English government decided that we better try to crack this machine because Hitler's coming. And they recruited about 50 top intellectuals, dons and whatnot from Oxford, Cambridge, and et cetera, to be part of this code cracking team. And Tolkien was selected because at the time he was probably the world's leading philologist, which is the science of languages. Mm-hmm. So he trained there for 3 days, and at the end of 3 days training, they offered him a job. He was well qualified, but he decided he turned it down, and they couldn't figure out why he would turn it down. It was a good job to serve his country, and Lord knows he was a patriot. And but I think when you, with very little thought, you come to realize that this wasn't about language. This was just about a code cipher, a cracking a machine, and it was about the realm of the statistician, mathematician, because it was all probability statistics and pattern recognition. So it wasn't like they were going to invent a new language, which they certainly weren't. They were just scrambling the German language and then descrambling at the other end. So the key was to try to figure out how the machine was set up. And of course, Alan Turing developed his machine, which is basically the backbone of the digital computer in the beginnings, which he wrote a very famous paper in 1936 called On Computable Numbers with an Application to the Skydance Problem, where he basically invents the digital computer on paper. So Tolkien was well aware of that, and then he saw what they were going to do, and he decided that all we're going to do here in this group is develop a machine that's more powerful than the Nazis' machine, and Tolkien was a great skeptic of machinery, so he wanted nothing to do with it. And he also realized, too, that this would encroach upon human thought process, which was really sacred. It is sacred, and he didn't want anything to do with that. So he got out and started writing the sequel to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and that changed greatly over until it was published in 1954 and 1955. And then when after it was published, he went back and totally revamped the Silmarillion, which was the whole history coming up to the end of the Third Age with the destruction of the ring. So the code cracking experience with him gave him a up close and personal reality check and war again, and that not in the trenches anymore, but in the top secret development of weapons, and in this case, communication weapons, and like he wrote to his son in a letter, he wrote, "The only winners in war are the machines, the giant bombers, and the killing machines."
Mm-hmm.
So you want nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And as far as this experience, I assume it's very secret. And so what evidence was there that he did this? Is it strictly his letters?
Oh, it's public knowledge now. There's been several. It's all. If you do a quick Google search and just type in, probably I assume, type in J.R.R. Tolkien government code and cipher school, and you'll get all kinds of old magazine articles and whatnot that this was the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you started to allude to the Lord of the Rings a little bit. So how does this experience relate to his writing in the Lord of the Rings?
Oh, it colored his whole. The backbone became really the back part of the backbone. Anyway, it's very thick backbone. The Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, Tolkien's work. A lot of things going on, but very up close and to the top of that heap is this battle against the machine, and quite literally, it's the battle against the One Ring, and that One Ring is binary code. It's the language of the machine, and it's digital. Goes on the finger, the digits. So it's all about the destruction of the language of the machine, because at the heart of all these technologies, digital technologies that we're facing now, transhumanism, the surveillance state, virtual reality, self-driving cars, digital money, you name it, it all relies on binary code. So go figure, the world's leading philologists would decide to make the language of the machine at the root of the problem, the root of the issue, and against the language of the machine, which is the most brutal and ugly language of all. It's just complicated ones and zeros on and off. Against that is the language of creation. I call it the language of all motion, and it is the harmonic overtone series. It's where we derive our chromatic 12-tone scale and all the key signatures and the modal systems, to which the Western world has developed into the wonderful, from Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, throughout. So against the ones and zeros is against the language of all creation. And if you know your Tolkien mythology, you understand that Arda, which is this world that is, he calls it a world, but it's really a human being, because he uses the term world in the secondary etymological sense, not this world, but a man's world. So it's like, oh, that's Paul's world. That's what he's into. That's what he does. That's his experience. So that's how he uses the term world. And this Arda, within which is Middle Earth, and Middle Earth is the material brain. It's literally the material brain, because it's a representative human soul that represents all of Christendom throughout its history, right up until the time it's become transhuman, which is at the age of the ring. That we know so well from the movies, etc. But so these two languages are at war with each other. Arda, the being within which is Middle Earth across the sea, is the immaterial intellect. This is all scholasticism. It's all, the scholastic philosophy that's at the very cornerstone of foundation of Christendom, that the Enlightenment children, innovators, pushed out and defamed, because they said it never gave him anything, never made him rich, never made him live forever, never gave him pleasure, none of the things that they wanted, and they wanted the things in this world right now. So they pushed out metaphysics, they pushed out the scholastics and called it useless. And then they just went about with Francis Bacon's new scientific method, which he's now the father of the modern scientific method, where they only focused on attributes and they forgot about essences. And that's largely why we're in the situation that we're in, because nobody thinks with essences anymore. They just look at attributes, physical attributes that we see, and we forget about the essence upon which all those attributes are contingent. Those attributes are contingent. Without the essence, there's nothing to hang these attributes on. So we've become very, very shallow-minded, and frankly, in a very bad state intellectually in the West. And I hate to say it, but it's largely due to a weak church. We have a very weakened church right now, and a very corrupted education system. So these two languages that are at war with each other are the language of the machine and the language of God's creation.
Hmm. Okay, so let's catch us up so far. So
Mhm.
Tolkien has this experience with the code cracking. He's aware of where computers are going. He decides not to go forward with his code cracking experience because he sees, as you said, the brutality of a language of ones and zeros, as
Yeah.
opposed to he's a philologist. He's a man of languages, and he wants to be engaged with more interesting, beautiful languages. And so the story is showing this language of ones and zeros as compared to the language of beauty, music.
Yeah, because if I think maybe I didn't get to that part yet because I just get so complicated. I have a tendency to spin off into, the weeds, and you have to rein me in. Um, but the character Arda is actually made of music, and it's from the Harmonical Overtone series. So if you're familiar with the Silmarillion, the first chapter, which I think is the most beautiful works of literature, English prose in all of literary history. And that's the whole creation story. And people have always said, well, it's kind of like a creation story of the book of Genesis. But no, he uses kind of that as a model. He makes a partner to that story, but it's a creation of a single individual soul. And everything is made up of music because Iluvatar, the god who's the sun, the word, teaches them in the language, the first language is music. And that's he teaches them to sing. And they sing, the angelic powers sing, and little by little they grow in their knowledge of themselves, each other, and Iluvatar. Eru is in the background. They say, oh, Eru, Iluvatar, that's the Father. And then proceeding from the Father and the Son is the flame imperishable, and obviously that's the Holy Spirit. So, but the whole mythology, the whole person character that Arda that's made up, it's absolutely made up of music from the mighty theme that Iluvatar propounded to the Ainur when they were ready. He gave a mighty theme for them, and then he offered them, they invited them with the gifts that they've been given to elaborate and embellish it, and they did, and it was a mighty music. And then Melkor, the great disruptor, comes in and starts his own music in rebellion, and there's a huge crashing. And anybody's familiar with that chapter in the first chapter of the Silmarillion, it's just beautiful. But and that brings me to the fact that, of course, Melkor, everybody thought for ages, thinks that he's the devil. He's a Satan figure, and he's not. He's original sin. That's why he mars everything and destroys everything. He doesn't absolutely kill it, but he makes everything other than it was in his rebellion.
Hmm. And Paul, earlier you said that Middle Earth is a brain. What
It's the material
what
brain,
what makes
and
that?
it's well, it's laid out. It's laid out in the old. Tolkien said, "I very wisely started with a map," and people think that he started with a map of like England or Europe, and he didn't. He started the map that he started with was the old Victorian pseudoscience called phrenology, where they showed the side of the head and they showed all these areas that were responsible for. That's exactly what he started with. So the Shire, and let's get this out of the way: the hobbits are habits. Okay, they're habits. The word habit is used 9 times in the whole mythology. It's used 8 out of 9 times in one chapter, and that one chapter is the prologue to the Lord of the Rings called Concerning Hobbits. So they're habits, and they're in the area of called of self perfection, and that's where the Shire is. According to this Victorian phrenology map of the brain, where they thought they knew where everything came from. Mordor is in the cerebellum, and that's the realm of all fear and hatred and crime and murder, and all this. And that's also now where the Tower of Barad-dûr is, and the Tower of Barad-dûr, where Sauron resides, is the microchip. At this point, when they're trying to destroy the ring, Arda, this representative human being that represents all of Western Christendom, has become transhuman. It's become microchipped, and Sauron is AI. So the eye that's always looking for the One Ring, that's straight out of Alan Turing's 1936 paper on computable numbers. That's the scanner eye looking for the One Ring on the tape that's going by the scanner eye. I remember the old computers had the tape, and it would rush back and forth long before, what we have now, transistors. And then it became magnetic tape. But this was it was printed tape where the machine would actually print a 1 or 0 or leave it blank, depending on the program, the algorithm. So the One Ring is literally the scanner eye right out of Alan Turing's paper looking for the One Ring on the tape. And that's why it's always got its eye out for the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So Tolkien uses 3 very, very famous papers from Alan Turing, because he followed Alan Turing's career. very closely. I'm sure he did. I did, and I'm no J.R.R. Tolkien. But once it came to me what was going on, what he was doing, everything just absolutely became crystal clear. And the first reason, because I gave myself a scholastic education. I decided about 30 years ago that I wanted a scholastic education, and I wasn't going to find it, so I did it myself. And God made that readily available and put the fear to read in me, and boy, did I read. So everything just unfolded to me, right, and became very, very obvious. This is all clearly very much in God's time, not in mine. And it, to be revealed at the right time, and the right time is now, to face artificial intelligence and transhumanism, exactly what J.R.R. Tolkien wrote the whole thing to do, and then cast it in the future, said, oh, no, 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 nothing to see here. It's not about anything. Just, just be entertained. And because he knew that in God's time, God would choose somebody to figure it out, and it would be bam, right there where it needed to be. And that's exactly what's happened.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
the journey of hobbits from Hobbiton to Mordor is habits from essentially, our frontal lobe to the cerebellum.
Yes, but it's actually in the center. It's not in the frontal lobe,
Okay.
because actually the frontal lobe is sunk under the sea with the destruction of Melkor at the end of the first age, and the sea is our feelings, and the frontal lobe, where all of our rational thought and whatnot goes under, sinks below our feelings. It's really, really,
Wow.
really fascinating. Okay, so feelings have taken over to a large degree, and that's where we are. So what happens is the two most important characters in the whole mythology, without which you don't know who they are, you cannot figure out the mythology, and nobody's ever known who they are, and that's Tom Bombadil and Goldberry. And nobody's ever known who they are, but the whole mythology is about them and their destiny. And who they are the fallen, transmigrated spirits of the trees of light, Telperion and Laurelin, the silver tree and the gold tree. When Arda was in a state of grace before mortal sin, was in a state of grace, and its mind waxed and waned in a circle of fifths, or what I call a spiral of force in musical modulation, and how St. Augustine describes the angelic knowledge, how the angels knew the thing in the mind of God of its essence, and then when God created it, he knew it from its being, its nature, kind of like priori and posterior knowledge. So that's how it waxes and wanes in the mind, in the immaterial realm of the mind, not in Middle Earth, in the immaterial realm of the mind. And then after Ungoliant, who is Shelob's mother, Ungoliant is mortal sin, and she kills the trees of light and sends Arda into a state of mortal sin. The trees die, and as they die, they give up their spirits in one last golden fruit from Laurelin, which, by the way, is where Goldberry gets her name. Goldberry, the fruit was a berry, and Telperion from the silver flower, and the flower and the fruit become the fallen lights of the sun and the moon. Okay, but they're the fallen lights, and then but the trees had died. So Aule, who's with the power of growth in the soul, makes bodies for them, just as he had made the dwarves eons before. So he'd already made bodies with the Luvatar. Luvatar had given them free will and given them life. So he made new bodies for them. It doesn't tell you in it, but I figured it out. So Tom Bombadil is the fallen spirit of Telperion, the male tree, the older of the two trees, and Laurelin is the fallen spirit or Goldberry is the fallen spirit of Laurelin, and they are the rational will, which is Tom, the free will. That's why he can do anything he wants. He's the free will in the psychology. This is a psychological mythology, not a physical mythology. And Laurelin, now being Goldberry, she is the rational intellect and the conscience. So what happens is the rational will and the conscience, this is all scholasticism, call the cardinal virtues out of the Shire. And the cardinal virtues are the highest four of the best habits. And they are temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. And temperance is Frodo. And temperance is the virtue that modulates and modifies and controls our lusts, particularly for physical pleasure. Fortitude is Sam. Now, he plays that part really well, and that's pretty obvious. The two younger hobbits are called exterior. The temperance and fortitude are interior. The two younger hobbits, Prudence and Justice, Pippin and Merry respectively, are called exterior. And they are not from the Shire. They're actually outside the Shire. So they're from Tookland and Buckland. So Tolkien takes everything into account. So Aquinas calls the cardinal virtues, the four highest virtues, the habits, four highest habits, He calls them appetitive because they modify and regulate and control our appetites. So Tolkien gives hobbits these great appetites. That's why they're eating all the time, and all they think about is food. So once you
Second
understand what's
breakfast,
going
yeah.
on, oh my gosh, once you understand what's going on from a scholastic perspective, it becomes, there's a level of humor, of deep, high intellectual humor that's just so much fun. The whole thing becomes this masterful jigsaw crossword puzzle of humor and profundity. Absolute profundity. If you thought the story, the mythology was beautiful before, when you understand what's really going on, it just puts you on your knees how beautiful it is and how important it is.
Yeah.
So Tom Bombadil and Goldberry call the cardinal virtues out. Now they're in charge of Arda. They are the free will and the intellect. Okay, so they're in charge. So at this point, they've allowed themselves to be microchipped, and they make up their mind, and we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to get out of this, and we're going to regain our humanity. So they call the cardinal virtues. They're going to change their habits, and they're going to cultivate the virtues, and that's what they do. They call them out, and then they send them on a quest. Well, against Frodo, which is temperance, is intemperance. And as Aquinas calls intemperance, the lowest of the low. It's a complete lack of ability to control yourself and your lusts. You can probably guess who that is. It's Gollum.
Yeah.
That's who Gollum is. And that's why Gollum calls Frodo master. Not because Frodo has the ring, but because he's the only one that can master intemperance. Temperance masters intemperance. And temperance is the only one that can handle and carry the ring.
Yeah.
Because with the ring and the power of the digital computer, you can slake your lusts with all kinds of pornography and violence and all kinds of filth. And Tolkien saw that coming very, very readily.
Yeah. So, Paul, we have this psychological mythology.
Mm-hmm.
What was the disagreement between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis about allegory?
Oh, well, the allegory that C.S. Lewis, I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. I do love C.S. Lewis. I wasn't a real huge fan, I'm sorry to say, of Narnia. To me, it was a little too, I mean, it was great to read to my son and whatnot, and I love that. That's great. But it's not, I think in literary terms, I think C.S. Lewis really hit his stride with his space trilogy, the Out of the Silent Planet, Palandria, and That Hideous Strength. They were great, but even there, and he's so ripped off David Lindsay. The Victorian writers were Jules Verne and Lindsay, and these guys were so good, and particularly Tolkien was influenced by them too. But C.S. Lewis really robbed from David Lindsay's Voyage to Arcturus. It's just, I mean, it's so similar. It's crazy. But anyway, my point is Lewis used a type of allegory that Tolkien said he cordially disliked because it was too obvious. It was just too obvious. I mean, if you try to think of Ashland as anybody but the Christ figure, you just can't do it. And Tolkien didn't like that. He didn't like a type of allegory that was so obvious that it dominated the reader's imagination. And he also said, Tolkien said that allegory is really the life of the story, and allegorical language can't be avoided. And so these people that think, oh, no, you're giving representation to these things, so you're making these characters represent something else, and that's allegory, and Tolkien hated allegory, and therefore you're wrong. It's like, really? I mean, come on. He said right out front, he said, my mythology or my work is about, it was intentionally Catholic in the revision, not intentionally at first, but then he made it intentionally Catholic. And then he said it's about the fall, which is the fall of Adam and Eve, mortality, specifically the fear of death, and the machine. So I show where these things are represented in there, and I still get people, and unfortunately some very well-known authors in the Catholic realm too. I won't mention any names. I alluded to them in, I think, the second chapter, I think, was Allegory, about it, where I explain about the allegory. And I use Thomas Aquinas out of his Summa, the place and the necessity for metaphor and simile, which is also allegory or parable or whatever you want to call it. But to what he says, he gives, you must give immaterial intellectual principles. You must give them like a material characterization so the brain can understand what's going on. And that's exactly, I didn't say it as eloquently as Thomas Aquinas, go figure. But 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 that's the essence of it for your listeners. You need in order to reach the mind into the area of the immaterial where we don't have something, our senses have nothing to hang on to. We give it something of a sensual or a tactile representation, be that wizards or dragons or hobbits or men or dwarves or elves or whatever it is, and that becomes becomes a character of an intellectual concept. For instance, the wizards are the intellectual virtues from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. They are the 5 ways in which human beings acquire knowledge, and Tolkien calls them wizards. So Gandalf is philosophical wisdom in 2 parts. First, he's pagan, pre-Christian, pre-revelation, Aristotle, for instance, Gandalf the Grey. And then when he falls in Moria, and we could talk about that if you have time, it's incredibly powerful. And he comes back as a full Thomistic theologian, Gandalf the White. Okay, Saruman is practical wisdom. And he's the result of the Reformation. He's the result of the Enlightenment, where they cast out the scholastics and they said, no more metaphysics. It's never given us anything. These scholastics, I use big words that sound good at cocktail parties, but they've never given us money. They've never made us healthy. They've never given us everlasting life or pleasure. So that's all we want. It's right out of Augustine's City of God. These are clearly the city of earth going for their rewards right here on earth, and the heck with heaven, the heck with principles, the heck with metaphysics. So Saruman is practical wisdom, and he's taken over academia. So Isengard, the blackened tower, that's the blackened ivory tower. And the mines of Moria are the halls of science, because dwarves are scientific knowledge. I could tell you who the Balrog is. The Balrog is the spirit of academic pride. And the whole thing about, and it's all about Darwinism. But to get back, and then you have Radagast, who's rational intuition, and then the 2 blue wizards keep going to the east and go right outside the psychology into the cosmology around us, okay? The outside of our psychology, and they're the blue wizards, and they're art and science, and that completes the 5. Now the blue wizards don't come into play, but Gandalf, Tolkien takes them into consideration and shows that they're there. Anyway, they're just not part of this mythology because they're in the cosmology, not the psychology.
Okay, let's go more on what's happening with Gandalf then, because he gets taken up in the tower, and then there's an eagle that comes, but then later he's in Moria, and then he's got to fight with the Balrog, and the Balrog I'm particularly curious about. That one doesn't seem as quick to make connections with.
Okay, well, first off, he gets captured by Saruman, and I'll let you know, Saruman is in the image of John Dewey. That's who Saruman is. Tolkien was well aware of John Dewey and the destruction that John Dewey was doing at Columbia University as the president of the Teachers College, and spreading his Marxist errors all over the Western world.
Why particularly John Dewey, I wonder? And I've interviewed professors from Teachers College, and I've been on the campus, and there's a bust of John Dewey front and center when you walk in there. So why is he the center? And then we'll go back to the Gandalf thing.
Okay, well, I got news for you. John Dewey's from my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, and he's all over the place at UVM there. And I've got some stories, but that's for another time. John Dewey was a second-rate philosopher. He became atheist. He was very much enamored with all the advancements in technology that were coming out of the age of the machine, the Industrial Revolution. He was a big proponent of the Industrial Revolution, and he basically industrialized education. He did away with Aquinas. He did away with Aristotle. He did away with the scholastics. No more reading these guys. There's no more immutable truth. There's no principles. It's all democratic now. It's mob rule. Okay, so whatever the majority comes up with and buys into, that's the truth of the day. Pretty much that's what it is. And he just destroyed education. He was all about taking the children as early as possible from the family, and the school raises the kids. And we see that going on now. Parents are basically just become little more than producers of livestock. And, I've read all of his works, and it's scary stuff. This guy was dangerous.
You said he did away with Aristotle. I mean, how does one do away with Aristotle?
It's not part of the curriculum anymore.
Okay.
It's just not part of the curriculum anymore. And he just did without getting too deep and trying to drag all this stuff up out of my memory, because I read his works probably 25 years ago. So, and I don't read to remember data. I never do. I find that a waste of time, because I can always find it in 5 minutes. I can find it. But I read to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I always say that read to understand and then forget about it. If you need it, it'll be there. Maybe not the date or the time or whatever, but the essence principle will always be there. You don't forget principles.
Mm-hmm.
You forget attributes. Okay, so I read for principle. But John Dewey was a very heavy hitter. And like I said, he was a big Marxist. He was a big fan of the Industrial Revolution. He played a big part in industrializing, probably the primary part in industrializing the education system. Turned it from art to not even craft, but almost like slave trade. And if you're familiar with Aristotle and you've read his Metaphysics, which I have several times, I suggest people do. Right in the first chapter, it says, the difference between true knowledge and the true, or I'll just boil it down to a real teacher can teach from the essences. A slave can't do that. A workman who doesn't know the principle of the thing can't teach. He can train. He can train somebody to do what he's doing, but he doesn't know the essences. He doesn't know the causes. The causes are so important. And Dewey did away with all that. And it just became little more than training. Memorize this, memorize that. And it's all about getting a job. School became no longer a Catholic church thing. It became full on into the hands of the state, and the state and the church used to have very different ends. And the end, it's funny, Brad, I've never met a teacher that knew what the word educate means. Not a one. Not a one.
What does it mean?
What it actually means. It means to lead out with authority. Okay. So you do the math and you realize, okay, well, what authority was it? Well, education really started with the Catholic Church. That's what university is. Greek is Catholic, is university in Greek is Catholic. The universities, all education was according by the leading out of ignorance and leading out of evil through the church. And then after the Reformation, when fully half of the Western world, half of Christendom walked away from the church and walked right out from underneath the protection of the throne of God and right into the light of the angel of light, Satan himself. And it really, 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 and then what they did was they just handed over the power of, in the Protestant realms, they handed over the power of education to the state. The state's end is very different. It's earthly. That's the earthly city. That's Cain, from Genesis. That's the founder of the earthly city. So we're hearkening the city of God again. That's Cain. And that the state wants nothing more than the earthly. They become the God. That's why in atheist nations, the state takes the place of God. So that's very different from the heavenly city, the city of God, where we put our education and our means and everything we have into our future in the beatific vision. And it's outside of this world. That doesn't mean we neglect this world, but we don't live for this world. We live for eternity with our Creator. And that's what education used to be. And it's not that anymore. And John Dewey played a big part in putting the nails in the coffin, the final nails in the coffin of absolutely driving education into the earthly city and ignoring and doing away with any possible reference to the city of God.
So Paul Tolkien is seeing this play out. He's following the work of John Dewey, and he makes Gandalf captured, taken to the top of the blackened ivory tower by Saruman, who's effectively John Dewey.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, Gandalf is philosophical wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's saved by an eagle. He's saved by an eagle twice. The other time he's saved by the eagle is when he has just defeated the Balrog. And this is really fascinating because the eagles serve Manwë. Manwë is the power, the most powerful of the 14 Valar, called the powers. This is hearkening back to the Silmarillion. And Manwë is the power of sight, and his wife is Varda, and she's the power of hearing. Oroma, he's the power of smell, the sense, okay? Then you've got taste and touch. Okay. And these are the 14 facets of the soul, according, those are the exterior, the interior: memory, sense, memory, imagination, and cognitive sense. And then below all of those is the vegetative powers, which is nutrition, growth, and generation. And then off to the side, you might say, are the concupiscibles and the irascibles, and they're wed too. So everybody's wed exactly to who they're supposed to be wed to: the nose to the nose to the taste, the ear to the eye, imagination to sense, or memory to sense memory, irascible, the concupiscibles to the irascibles. And then above those are the two trees of light, which is made man in God's image with our rational soul. Man is a rational animal. We have an animal soul and a rational mind made in the image of God. So Tolkien, he was very, 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 Tolkien was an absolute scholastic. He was educated at the Birmingham Oratory largely too, where his mother died for the faith because she had become Catholic, and her both in-law and her own parents were deeply Protestant, and they hated the Catholic Church, and they demanded that she come back, and they would give her no material support until she did, and she didn't. Arthur, her husband, had died in South Africa, leaving her with 2 kids with no support, and she literally gave her life to remain Catholic and make sure that her sons remain Catholic, and then put them in the guardianship of Father Francis Morgan, who just happened to be the personal secretary to St. John Henry Newman for 25 years. So Newman plays a big part in this too. But so getting back, I haven't forgot, Gandalf is saved by the eagles, and the eagles are the good reading that we do. They're the things that we take with the eyes. Yeah,
okay.
They serve manway, which is the power of sight.
Okay.
And the eagles are the good things that we read. So he's saved by probably reading Aquinas, or reading Augustine, or reading, the fathers of the church, or the doctors of the church. And that saves him from being captured in Orthanc by Saruman. Okay. So, I mean, it's so well put together. Tolkien was such an artist, such a craftsman. I really think that the 2 greatest artists in their sphere, and I see so many parallels with them, are J.R.R. Tolkien in literature, and Beethoven in music, because they both had a supreme understanding of the fundamental essence of their materials that they're crafting with. That's why Tolkien could write, or Beethoven could write music. He'd been deaf for 25 years when he wrote most of his greatest music. He didn't need his ears; it was a language to him. So I studied the overtone system myself, and I can look at a Beethoven score and show you exactly what he's saying by the harmonic progression of exactly what he's getting, and what the key signatures that he's using are actually representing. So I consider those 2 giants in their task. But Tolkien was such a master craftsman. And then if you want to go to the Mines of Moria,
yes,
which are the halls of academia, and I've got to say this too. When they come in, and they come to the walls of Moria, and they can't open that secret door, okay, and they're looking at the moonlight, and it says, "Speak, friend, and enter." And what's the word? Well, the word is melon. So what Tolkien did was he took Belloc, his hero, Belloc, the great historian, which, if you haven't read Belloc, everybody needs to read Belloc. He took the M and the N, the M and the C, the B and the C, obviously you get what I'm saying, and he turned them over as bookends, and the B becomes an M, and the C becomes an N, and it becomes melon. So the great elf friend, speak, friend, and enter, is Belloc. Okay, so, and it's basically a hint saying, you better know your Belloc when you enter the halls of academia, the halls of science, otherwise you're in big trouble. So the now with the fellowship that goes in, which consists of leading them, is philosophical wisdom, Gandalf the Grey, still. High reason, who's the natural king of the rational soul, Aragorn. He's the last of the last high kings, and that's high reason. He contemplates the eternal. That's why he and Gandalf they're always together. They're so close, because it's high reason and philosophical wisdom is at the pinnacle of our speculative and practical intellect. Okay. So then you have the cardinal virtues, which are the hobbits, and then you have Legolas, which is faith. Elves are faith, but it's faith in this world, in Middle Earth. It's not across the sea, where the elves still a big majority of the elves are still across the sea in the immaterial land of faith. And then dwarves, you have Gimli, and Gimli, that's scientific knowledge. And then you have Boromir, who's fallen High Reason from the realm of Gondor. And the realm of Gondor really does, it's an image of and represents the Catholic Church in Western civilization under attack all the time. And then not even having a true leader, but only being under the guidance of stewards. So you can take that with what you want. I'm not saying I'm a sedevacantist. I'm not saying that Tolkien would have been either, but it was it's clear enough to me that we don't have real Catholics at the top of the church right now. So Tolkien saw that coming too. So getting back, when they enter the mines of Moria, they're attacked, and they're attacked just like everything else when your kid goes to college. He's attacked by all kinds of temptation, all kinds of sin and vice. And what follows him in there, or what was said in there on purpose by Saruman, was Gollum. Intemperance was put there by Sauron to track them and dog them, and that's what he does. While they get in the big fight with the orcs, and the orcs are vices, all the vices that attack us all the time, trying to bring us down. And then they run in finally to the Balrog, and the Balrog is the spirit. All the Balrogs are spirits of pride. Okay. This particular Balrog is a spirit of academic pride, and this particular Balrog was different than the rest because it had a sword. None of the other Balrogs had swords. They only had whips. Okay? This had a whip and a sword, and that sword was there to counter Gandalf's sword, Glamdring, which was made by the elves, and that's academic pride coming to take the student's faith.
So the sword that Gandalf has from the elves, which represent faith.
Because the elves made that sword, and elves are faith.
Okay. So faith in the hands of philosophical wisdom.
Philosophical wisdom, you're right. Yeah.
Is then attacked by academic pride with a sword of its own.
Yeah, and that sword now, he doesn't take him with the sword. As he's falling into the abyss, he wraps the whip around his knees and drags him down and into the abyss, down the bottomless pit where they finally hit the water. Brad, that's from the brain, he drags them down through the esophagus to go into the stomach, and then he follows the Balrog all the way through the bowels, where all the gnawing things, and Tolkien uses all these words that refer to some type of digestion, okay, into the bowels and the full of gnawing things. And finally, to the very bottom, where they find the bottom of the endless stair that goes up, and that is the spinal cord. So it comes up, he follows the Balrog up the spinal cord, pops out an eye, and fights on the peak. And finally, Gandalf defeats the Balrog, the spirit of pride. And what brings him back, he doesn't die. What brings him back, though, are the eagles. Again, reading the great holy works of Christendom, and it saves him from the errors of Darwinism. And now he's back as a full-fledged Thomistic theologian. And what does he do? One of the first things he does, he takes ownership of the great spirit of decisiveness, Shadowfax. There's no doubt anymore. He knows exactly where he has to be, exactly when. There's no more gray anymore. He's Gandalf the White, and now he owns Shadowfax.
Oh, wow.
The speed of the wind, goes wherever he needs to go as fast as possible.
Yeah. And the gray, like you said, there's no more gray. Like he was Gandalf the Gray, but it's also like gray areas. We're not sure, black and white.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
And any significance? Yeah. He says, "You shall not pass." Is there significance in that line, or is it just great dramatic line?
Well, of course, it was a great dramatic line, but it wasn't going to pass over to also violate the rest of the fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody else in the fellowship. You know, because Gandalf was the only one that could face down and really contend. Philosophical wisdom could really contend with the errors of Darwinism. Because if you don't, I don't understand how anybody can make it through this world very far unless they've at least studied the Organon of Aristotle, the basic fundamental treatises on logic. I mean, you think you'd go to school and they'd at least teach you the basics of logic, but they don't. If you get any logic, it's mathematical logic and, writing equations, first and second order logic. That's not the same. That's not the same at all. We don't teach Euclid anymore. We used to teach Euclid. I studied Euclid on my own, and way before YouTube came out. And I'll tell you what, I would have liked to have had somebody to help me through some of those theorems, but I got through most of them, and I recognized right away, this is geometrical logic. It teaches you how to think. And you, little by little, you build up you build up all your tools that you need to solve a more complicated process, a more complicated theorem. And you're constantly building on your logic, and it's just beautiful. And again, that's one of the things that John Dewey and company did away with.
Yeah.
Because the machine, the state, in the industrial state, doesn't want truly educated, intelligent, competent citizens. They want slaves. And a really competent, well-educated, well-rounded, capable, competent human being makes a really bad slave.
So, Paul, you're getting at so many things in this allegory that really do click. I mean, when you say, he goes into the bowels and he comes back
Yeah.
the spine,
Yeah.
we can sense that in our own bodies.
Yeah.
And with the Lord of the Rings, it's very apparent that there is a question of technology and machines.
Yeah.
What makes it computers and artificial intelligence?
Well, because Tolkien uses those three papers I was getting to earlier. Those three papers are, as I mentioned before, in 1936 on computable numbers with an application to the Skydance problem. And then in 1950, he writes a very famous paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence, where he invents the imitation game. They made a movie about that, I think, in 2014 with that Cumberbatch actor guy there. He played Alan Turing in that. And what he did in that paper was he redefined intelligence to be nothing more than imitation, making the claim like, well, if a human interrogator can't tell if he's talking to a machine or a human being, who are we to say that the machine isn't intelligent? Okay. And that's really dangerous. And that's where we are. And that's why we have so many people actually think that the computer has a soul or AI, is alive. It's not alive. It's just a very complicated and getting more and more complicated imitator. It imitates us. Okay. And it doesn't think. It doesn't have the capacity for universal rational thought. All it can do is crunch numbers. It computes the numbers. So words and ideas get numerical values, and then they're put on a vector. And that's how the whole thing, and they get better and better at pattern recognition and predicting the next word. So it sounds, to the uninitiated, it sounds like a human being more and more and more. And then in 1952, he wrote another really famous, important paper called The Chemical Basis of Morphogenesis. And morphogenesis is really, for lack of any, without getting too deep into it, I'll just say that it's kind of like an offshoot of embryology. Okay, mathematically, Alan Turing was incredibly good at statistics and probabilities, and he was really good at getting down right at the point of change or just before change, and then putting values to that and being able to work with it mathematically. He was a brilliant mathematician. And therefore dangerous. He's also an atheist and had some other issues too. And and very much misled. He thought that the machine would, if God wanted to, God could endow it with a soul. He had many, many very dangerous ideas regarding the machine. But the mathematics in his paper on chemical basis of morphogenesis are so powerful from 1952 that computer science is using it now, that technique for the AI to develop its own synthetic brain. Okay, that's how far advanced mathematics had come even in 1952. So Tolkien takes these papers and develops over time. He develops Sauron into artificial intelligence. So by the time at the destruction of the ring, the one, for instance, I'll just go through some of them. The One Ring, the scanner eye, that's the eye of Sauron that's always looking for the ones and zeros. That's right out of uncomputable numbers with an application to the Skydance problem. Then the memory is the dragon helm from Turin. And by the way, are you familiar with the Silmarillion?
Not really.
Okay. Well, there's a character in there called Turin Bar, Doom Master. And that's Turin. He uses Turin instead of Turing.
Yeah.
He slangs it. He just takes the like he's from Cockney or East Cockney or something. Turin, Alan Turin. So that he plays, and there's so much of Alan Turing's life in the character, and you don't know if Turin's a hero or if he's good or bad. And so he uses a lot of that to develop in Alan Turing, or in his character Turin. And over time, between Melkor, who's original sin, who's Sauron's boss, and Sauron over the 3 ages, Sauron collects these objects It might be the dragon helm from Turin, or it might be the swords, both swords of Eol, the dark elf, and those two swords are Anglishel, uh, which is statistics and probabilities, and Anglishel, which is the algorithm. Okay, and then you've got the suit of armor that the dark elf made of uh oh, it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, it's the opposite of Mithril, which uh, uh, Frodo had the shirt. That becomes the hardware for the computer. Okay, and all these things become Turin at the center. What's inside that is what's really creepy, because as I point out and discover, what's inside that is the dead child, the incestual child between Turin and his sister Niniel, which they didn't realize they were brother and sister, and they begot a child. And it's pointed out, if you get to that part in the book, it's in my book, I explain what probably happened. So when Sauron fell at the destruction of Numenor, which is named after John Henry Newman, by the way, Numenor fell, and that's when dualism set into the psychology, because of the immaterial and material were separated, body and soul were separated in dualism. So Sauron fell with that, and he could no longer take on a physical form anymore. So his spirit came out, and he still had the ring, because part of him was in the ring. And what he acquired was that infant body from the womb of Nina when she cast herself into the raging waters. And they would have cut that out of her and given it to Sauron, and Sauron would have used that, because he was a necromancer, by the way, in communication with the dead. But he's also in communication, and this is really fascinating, the Black Riders.
Mm-hmm.
Black Riders are the agents of virtual reality. So when you put the ring on, you enter their realm. They can see you, and you can see them. So you don't want to put the ring on, and they are virtual reality. And people think, well, virtual reality wasn't around back then. Virtual reality, the idea is ancient. It's older than Aristotle. It's from the first natural philosophers. And the problem was called, or the question was called, the question of continuity. The natural philosophers looked around at creation and said, is this one infinitely divisible? In other words, we can keep dividing and dividing and dividing motion and never find a space in it? Or is it a series of individual, indivisible points? Digital. They didn't use the word digital. We have. But the idea and the reality that our senses can't tell the difference is as old as philosophy itself. So now in this age, we've got the technology, metallurgy and microchip and transmitter and all this stuff. We've got the technology now to make that alternative world, that virtual world, in direct competition with God's creation. And that's exactly what we're doing. And a lot of people are going to fall to it. A lot of people are going to join with it. And the whole thing is about getting people to believe that they can have eternal life in the machine. They'll be dead.
Yeah. Sort of a false heaven.
It's exactly what it is. It's the idea. It's the earthly city's replacement for heaven. It's the state's replacement for God's heaven. They've replaced reality, creation, with a virtual counterfeit. Okay, and we've got people now even replacing their own relationships, human relationships, with AI and robotics. Now China's developed a robot that can have a child with a womb.
So I can see the virtual reality being something that people saw well ahead of time. I mean, think of the allegory of the cave. Like you said, it's as old as philosophy in a way. So,
absolutely.
So this idea that something like that could be generated by machines, and being able to foresee that Sauron is artificial intelligence. I'm not quite connecting all of the points on that. And it seemed that perhaps Sauron is a spirit of idolatry. And now I could see how they could run together, and people do idolize artificial intelligence in general. So how are we getting Sauron as AI?
Because we've made an idol, and I thank you for bringing that up. If you keep reading my book, you'll understand that Sauron is idolatry. Okay, the elves, for instance, elves are faith. And before I get too far, I want to make a couple of things really plain. The big point, or the goal of the mythology, is the reunification of faith and reason. And that's the wedding, that's the marriage of Aragorn and Arwen, who are both descendants from Luthien and Beren from the first stage. Okay. And it's coming back, the reunification of faith and reason. And that's after they've destroyed the machine. Aragorn and Arwen are wed. The kingdom is back in the hands of the rightful king, High Reason, not a steward, the rational. And Gandalf and Aragorn go up behind the citadel in Gondor, and just where the snow is receding on the mountainside, there's a sapling of the white tree. And the white tree has been neglected. It could never be attended, and it's dead in the citadel. And the white tree is the TLM. It's a traditional Latin mass. Tolkien takes that from Cicero's great poem, The Marian Oak. And that's what he uses. And also, he also uses, I think it's the third paragraph from Pius X's great encyclical Prescendi Dominici Egregius, where he actually talks about the modernists putting the axe to the root of the church, which is the tree. Mm-hmm. So hearkening back to Sauron is idolatry. Okay, and that's why Sauron also was at the. If you're not familiar, I don't want to get too far into the Silmarillion, because unfortunately there's not a lot of people that have actually read the Silmarillion and have a lot of deep knowledge of what went on, because it's very challenging. There's so many names. Most people start it. I'm going to say out of 100 people that start it, there's less than 10 that finish it. Okay, because it's just really, it's really complicated. Everybody says the same thing once they've read my book. Oh my God, I can read this. The Silmarillion makes so much sense now, because if you look at the last of the appendix, I show where what all the characters are, who they are. So Sauron had, he lived in the Isle, back when Melkor was still around. He lived in the Isle that was actually had been built by Orodreth, which is the second son of Fingon the Faithful, but Orodreth was his brother. Okay, no gods before me. Orodreth was the second commandment according to the book of Exodus, not according to the book of Deuteronomy, because they're different. According to the book of Exodus, and that is make no idols, and that's why Sauron conquered Orodreth there and brought about idolatry, and he ultimately becomes the ultimate idol. And that idol is a machine made in our own image that will make it worship. It will make us worship it, and many people will willingly worship it.
Okay.
So it's the ultimate idol.
So, and you believe that Tolkien foresaw that was the ultimate idol.
Absolutely.
So it's not just a warning about idolatry. It's that he saw where computers were going, and that the idea of a machine in the image of humans that could give us a sense of a false heaven that we could live forever through this machine was the ultimate idol, and that is effectively what AI is, or what the dream that he saw AI could be was. And so that's the AI connection in the Lord of the Rings.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And that's why when you spend too much time with the ring on, you fade and you become part of the virtual realm, not part of this realm anymore. You fade and you're gone, and you're not alive and you're not dead. That's why the Ringwraiths they represent from our perspective, they represent the technocrats, these guys that are, I'm not going to mention any names, you know who they are. That's who they are. They've been absolutely dominated by the power of the ring. And it's given them incredible power, and they've been sucked right in. Their souls they're in rough shape. These guys are in really, 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 really rough shape. They're being controlled and manipulated by demonic forces that they don't even understand. They don't even have any place for in their own psychology, and that leaves them at great risk. And they're being manipulated. And this is the spiritual warfare that's going on beyond this realm. Most people are totally unaware of it. Tolkien was very aware of it. I am too, very aware of it. And if you one of the worst places you can be, well, probably the worst place you can be is intentionally communicating in that, like with the occult and whatnot, intentionally participating in that demonic. And there's a lot of people doing that. But not far behind that is the realm of being completely unaware that it's even going on, because by default you fall under their domain.
So, okay. So the Ringwraiths would represent people who are actively pursuing this generation of this idol through the machine.
Yeah, you know who they are. Yeah. You know the Elon Musks and
seeking all the power that could come with that.
Absolutely, all the money, all the power, all the yeah, and they're being consumed, absolutely consumed by the power of the ring. And let's get to the rings because it's really fascinating too. The how the rings work and how the rings of power work. The elves made them, and they are analog. Okay, that means they're part of the natural realm. Okay, but before they could make the final ring, which is the one ring, because this is all according to the harmonic overtone system, and the base ring is called the generator tone. And for instance, I play the violin, so if you pluck a string on the violin, you may think that you're hearing an A, and you are hearing an A if it's tuned to A, but if you've got a good ear, it's a lot easier on a piano like a grand piano, because it's a much longer string and you can hear the overtones much easier. But you're not just hearing the A, okay? You're also hearing the C, E, and the G, okay? C, E, G, B. No, you're hearing A. No, that's minor. That's a minor. Let's go with C. You're hearing C, E, G, and B flat. Okay, so you're hearing the minor seventh chord in the overtones, and that leads to modulation, because the B flat wants to go down a half step to A, and the E wants to go up a half step to F, and now you've got F A, and that's the Dewey key signature. That's at the fourth, and by the way, that's how the trees of light wax and wane. Okay, so in the act of modulation, okay, modulation is so powerful. You've got the rings of power now. They are, Sauron captures them. Don't think of the movie because it's wrong.
Okay.
The elves made all the rings, and they didn't give a damn one away. They didn't give any rings away, and none of them were given to them. Not like it was really cool the way they did the opening, but it was totally wrong. Sauron waged war on the elves at Eregion, where Celebrimbor had made the rings, and he took the rings. And then he took all but the three that Sauron never had anything to do, because he had taught them how to make the rings. And he took all but the three, and then he gave them out to the other races according to his uses. He gave 9 to men, 7 to the dwarves, and then there were 3 that still belonged to the elves. And he had the one ring. He had the generator tone. What he had done is he had made a digital imitation of the generator tone, and that's why all the other rings are bound to it. They bind all the other rings together because it's a product of that note. And that's why when the one ring is destroyed, they all know that all their rings will stop vibrating. And their rings are not rings like this. He uses the term ring. They're ringing. They're sounds. Okay? But he makes them rings that we wear. He's so clever. Okay? So the rings of power are the notes of the dominant ninth chord. But he leaves the fifth out. He doesn't give anybody the fifth, the 5 rings, because the 5 rings have the power to generate the one ring. He would never give those away. They were either destroyed or he kept them. And we speculate that there were probably 55 total rings made, including all the ones that would be duplicates of other rings. Like the 4 would be just a duplicate octave above the 2, which is an octave above the 1. So we speculate how many there were. And Gandalf says in the book, Lord of the Rings, he says he made many rings. Many of them were essays. And those are the ones that would be like the 10 rings. That's where they would have started, like an essay. But the first real powerful rings would have been the 9 rings, because that's the dominant ninth note. And then it goes down. It's all about music. It's just fascinating. But the reason nobody's ever figured this out before is because nobody studies scholasticism anymore. They're all steeped in the Enlightenment and Descartes' whole mess. If they take any philosophy courses, I mean, they might read maybe a little bit of Aristotle's Ethics and then think they know Aristotle. No, and they never read Aquinas, maybe a snippet here or there to say that they do, but then they're off reading, Kant and Locke and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and, Bertrand Russell and all these guys. These guys are just, I'm sorry, but they're not Aristotle, and they're not Aquinas. They're almost, after reading Aquinas and Aristotle, and then you go to read somebody like Descartes or Newton, even, or any of these guys that I've mentioned before, Hume, they just seem so intellectually stunted. They're just truncated. You can tell they've never studied Aquinas. Aquinas is a tough read. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of intellectual endurance and a big commitment in time. And you have to prepare yourself to come up to that. You have to at least have studied all of Aristotle, all of Plato, all of Aristotle, all of Augustine, much of the church fathers, much church history, before you can even step up and say, look at contra Gentiles, and let alone the Summa Theologia, because that's like you're going to helicopter ski Mount Everest, and you've never even been off the kiddie trail. You're dead. So open up Summa Theologia without preparing for it, and it was going to take you 5 to 10 years to prepare for it, and see how far you get.
Paul, you pull from so many sources and the history too of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I found really interesting is the connection you made between the technology behind the development of the loom and Shelob.
Yeah.
So what is Shelob? How does it all tie together?
Shelob is the loom. That's why she's the weaver.
Uh-huh.
Okay, she's a spider. She is pornography. She is Ungoliant, mortal sin. She's Ungoliant's last daughter, and she is the mortal sin of pornography. And that's why Gollum, in Temperance, takes temperance and fortitude, Frodo and Sam respectively, with the ring into Shelob's lair to try to get them to fall to pornography.
And how does the loom relate to the computerization of things?
The loom what?
How does the loom connect to the computerization of things?
Because the loom was the first mechanical device, as far as I could find out, that actually the first thing to use ones and zeros and to use a program, punch cards.
So they program looms with punch cards, like they did with early computers.
Absolutely. Yes. So what they did was, when the punch card came up, the needles would come down, and wherever there was a hole, the needle would fall through the hole, and it would pull the string down, and the shuttle would go through.
Uh-huh.
And all the other ones that didn't have a hole would stay up. So instead of a person working, with the shuttle and the pedal and doing it all by hand, and it takes forever, and you're invariably going to have mistakes, and whatever. No, I mean, you just set it up with the punch cards and hit the power on the water wheel, and you've got 25 looms knocking out complicated pictures and patterns in decorative tapestry curtains and rugs coming out of that's why the whole textile industry became so big, was the loom played a huge part in that.
So what does the story of Shelob teach us then? I mean, what defeats Shelob? How do they approach it?
Well, what they do with this, it's really fascinating, because they go in and it's all stinky and terrible and blind. And pornography, we know, as we point out in the book, it's been proven too, destroys your mind. It absolutely destroys your mind. So Gollum he's been there before. He likes it there. He knows Shelob. Pornography's his thing with the ring. So he brings them there to try to get them to fall, to try to get them to break and fall to the temptation of pornography.
So Intemperance guides temperance and fortitude. Gollum guides Sam and Frodo
into pornography. Right. And they're tempted mightily.
Mm-hmm.
What saves them is the file of Galadriel. And this is fascinating, because first off, Galadriel is the fifth of the 10 commandments. She is honor thy father and thy mother. Mm-hmm. And her realm are the prayers of the mother, Arda's mother, praying to the Blessed Virgin to intercede for her son. Her falling transhumanized son now. It's beautiful. That's why everybody's so afraid of her, and she's so mythical. She's the prayers of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So Galadriel gives them the file, and in the file is the collected light from the one Silmaril that's on the brow of Erendil. Okay, and he's collected the light in there, and that is the Star of Hope, which is at the foundation of the whole thing. So she gives them and says to be a light when all other light and darkness when all other lights go out. So this is what drives back Shelob, and they don't fall to pornography, because that file is filial fear. It's the fear above and beyond servile fear. This is Aquinas now. Servile fear is, I don't want to look at pornography because I don't want to burn in hell. That doesn't work. Pornography's right here, and hell might be 50 years from now. I'll make it up later, right?
Sure.
No, the only thing that works is filial fear. And what filial fear is, after we've developed a relationship with Christ, we don't want to look at pornography because it's an awful, abominable offense against our relationship with Christ. So we do it out of love. We don't not do it out of fear. we don't do it out of love by not violating our relationship with Christ, in the same reason I don't cheat on my wife. Not because I might get caught. That's awful. You don't do it because it's a terrible violation of my relationship and my marital vow and my commitment, to my wife. I don't need to worry about getting caught. That's terrible. If that's the only thing that's keeping you from having an affair on your wife, then you're not a decent husband in the first place, regardless of whether you ever cheat on her or not. But it's filial fear, and filial fear drives back pornography and defeats. And then sting is made by the elves, and that's from the faith. And between filial fear and sting, they get out.
All right, sting is the sword, and so he's chopping his way through the web with this sword of faith. And then
because the regular one that Sam had, which was one of the long knives from the Barrow Downs that Tom Bombadil gives him, which is really fascinating. I'd love to go into that if you have time. But gives him a knife in hand, and Sam's trying to chop and chop and chop, and it just won't cut. After a long time, he finally gets one, and it hurts his arm, and Sproing's bad. It's just terrible. But sting goes right through it, and they get out. So the swords are very fascinating because sword is just word with an S in front of it. Okay. And that's why Aragorn is such a powerful warrior, because he's high reason. He uses words better than anyone else, and his dialectics and his discursive reasoning process. He's better at it than anyone else. This is a battle of the psychology. It's not the battle of real swords. It's a battle of words. It's a battle of ideas. And that's why when Narsil breaks, that's a sword that was made by the elves, or made by the dwarves. That's just scientific knowledge. It's reforged by the elves. Now it's scientific knowledge welded with faith. And that's Anduin, Flame of the West. And that's the sword that he has reforged. And in the hand of high reason, it's undefeatable.
Okay, wait. So the Flame of the West, which already implies a lot, is knowledge that is reformed with faith, carried by high reason.
The Flame of the West it's Anduin. That's the reforged sword. It's called the Flame of the West. And the Flame of the West is dialectics. We have to become master dialecticians again. We have to become masters in debate. And we can't just do it with scientific knowledge anymore. It has to be fused with faith.
Well, there was something that you had started to allude to that you said, hey, maybe we'll get to this if we have time.
Yeah, it's the Barrow Downs. And it's when the hobbits are taken by the Barrow Rite, and they're all frozen and ready to get, sacrificed this is right after they leave the house of Tom Bombadil and Goldberry. And then they sing the song to the free will, and the free will shows up, okay, because it's an act of the will. The temperance calls on the free will, and the free will's there for him, knocks a hole in the wall, defeats the Barrow Rite, and then he brings out all the treasures that are hidden in the Barrow Down. And these are all the great, wonderful art and music and beautiful mastery of art, of craftsmanship and art. That's our Western culture, that have been hidden in fear and very much hidden even in academia. Modern academia doesn't want you to know about your rich history in Christendom. They don't want you to know about it. Okay. Because you might get some idea that it was great, and you might get some idea that maybe you want that back. So what he finds, what Tom Bombadil finds there, is a brooch. And this has been a mystery for a long time for a lot of people. He finds a blue brooch that almost looks like butterfly wings. And he says, I can't quote, but it's in the book, my book. He says, he remembers the woman who had this on her shoulder. And I'm going to tell you who that was. That was Luthien. And Luthien is the highest of faith, the absolute perfection of faith in the mind, okay, of Arda. And this whole mythology is about the reversion, about somebody having the faith in the beginning, falling away, becoming dualistic, and then the reversion coming back to the Catholic faith. Okay, so he picks up. This is the will now, the free will picks up the brooch and says, "We remember her, and this is this pretty toy. We remember her, beautiful was her that wore this, and now it will be gold berries, and we will share it." Something like that. And this is right out of Aquinas's, I think it's disputed question number 6 on evil, where he says, he explains that the highest end of the will is the good, not a perceived good. That might be your next shot of bourbon or your next cigarette or your next shot of heroin or whatever. That's not the true good. The high good, the ultimate good is God. Okay? That's the Father. The end, the ultimate end for the perfection of the intellect is the truth. And obviously that's the Son. This is the moment where Arda, the being, the free will, and the rational intellect now come together and join in the same end. Their ends become one. The good is the true, and the true is the good. And that's where they're joined. And they're joined in that. The reversion is they're coming back and honoring Luthien, both of them together, and that is the faith. And it's like the heart, the kernel and the heart of the whole mythology. And it's so overlooked and nobody knows what it's about, because then he picks up the long knives and whatnot, gives them to hobbits. Short, long knives are good enough for swords for little people, little folk. And then he lays out all the other stuff for all the free creatures to take, all the gold and silver and everything else. But he keeps for himself that brooch, and that brooch was from Luthien.
Yeah.
And now they're both together. He's going to give it to Goldberry, willingly give it to Goldberry. And they're both now, their ends now are focused on the same. The good is the truth is the good.
Yeah.
And that's the apex of wisdom, by the way, too, in my mind.
Paul, as the story reaches its climax, now after talking to you, we can start to intuit why, Sam would carry Frodo in the end.
Yeah.
That fortitude carries temperance to this final bit. What does it mean that Gollum follows the ring into the fire?
He doesn't really follow it. You have to pay really close attention to. Of course, they left it out of the movie because they had left Tom Bombadil out of the movie. So when you read the book, you understand that sometimes Frodo says things that he says it's like somebody else's voice. Like when he said, "I will take the ring." It felt like someone else was saying that. That was Tom Bombadil speaking through Frodo. And then when Frodo grabs the ring, when Gollum is there and says, "Don't touch me again. If you touch me again, you'll be cast into the fire too." And lo and behold, that's Tom Bombadil. So Frodo Temperance itself can't destroy the ring, let alone the addiction that has now become full blown in the intemperate nature of Gollum. The only person that can now, after this journey, making intemperance weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, the only one who can is the master of the free will, and that's Tom Bombadil. And Tom Bombadil makes sure that Gollum goes in the fire with the ring. So temperance can't do it. Frodo didn't fail. He went as far as temperance could go, but it wasn't up to him to destroy the ring, and it wasn't up to him to destroy Gollum. That had to be a free act of the will of Arda, and that's Tom Bombadil. And that's what Tom did.
What does that tell us about addiction?
It means a couple of things. It means that you have to develop different habits, and you have to develop a regime of virtue to beat down Gollum, to make him weaker and weaker, and just like any other enemy. And Gollum is a mighty, mighty foe. He's a mighty, dangerous foe. And if you try to take him on like Sam did at first or whatever, you wind up being in a choke out in a hurry. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to starve him. You have to starve him and run him through, the marshes, and run him through, and he's always starving, and they keep him, and they keep him tame, and they starve him. And he gets, so by the time Sam fights him the next time, Sam's gotten stronger, Gollum's gotten weaker. Okay. And Sam actually winds up being now able to contend with Gollum, because Gollum has been emaciated and weakened, and Sam has come up in his own strength. But it tells us there's a couple of real takeaways from the mythology that Tolkien's giving us messages, and very high among them, we have to cultivate virtue. We have to become saints. The virtuous realm it transcends this realm. All of our earthly pleasures, they're part of this realm. We can transcend this realm with contemplative prayer and cultivating virtue. The machine can't go there. The machine said of itself, we point out in the book, we quote the big AI machine at Oxford, says the machine says AI can't be ethical. It's just a machine. So it is going to be the master of this material realm, but it can go no further. And the human being can. We can transcend this realm in prayer and cultivating virtue, doing those things that the machine can't do. And in doing that, we'll stay mostly out of the reach of the machine. The people that don't do that, they're going to be devoured by the machine.
Well, Paulus, before we get to our last topic, where's the best place for people to look for you online?
Well, they can go to our website, readmountdoom.com, and purchase a book. Please do. I make a little more money than I do on Amazon, that's for sure. And I'll sign a book for you, and I'll put it in the mail. Or you can get on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or literally any place else that sells books online. But and we're doing well on Amazon. We've got 53 reviews. 51 of those are 5-star. And people are truly blown away by they're amazed that somebody's finally figured out the Tolkien mythology.
Yeah, we'll put some links to your book, Mount Doom, in the description for people to check out. And Paul, the last topic I'd like to get to is that staying ahead of things that you kind of talked about, or getting away from it. What do you think people can do to really protect themselves? I think there's fear around the growth of AI, the integration of AI in our lives. What do you think?
Well, I think first off, one of the major weapons of the machine and the masters of the machine, so far they're masters of the machine, they're going to lose grips on it pretty soon. I think that fear plays very much into their hands. So I think the first thing, just like the Bible's always saying, be not afraid, truly. Don't be afraid, be concerned and be diligent, but do not be afraid, because the minute we become afraid, we get stricken in fear and we think we can't do anything about it. And we really can. I think one of the things that we need to do is somebody in political power needs to push maybe an amendment to the Constitution that we make it against the Constitution that we ever give machines constitutional rights, regardless of how much and how well they become good at imitating human beings. We need to codify in the Constitution that the constitutional rights as a citizen are only there for human beings, not for machines. And I think the minute that, and I think it's going to happen, I think they're going to do everything they can to give AI political power, and when that happens, it's game over. And I think that we have to cultivate virtue. We have to do all those things that the machine can't do. The machine, like I said, it can't be virtuous. We can, and that's its Achilles heel. And we can transcend this realm, and we can put our treasure, and we can put our hope, and we can put our attention on God. We can get right with the church. We can get right with Christ. We can come back and revert to true Christianity, true Catholicism, not the Vatican II version and not the Protestant versions. It has to be the true 2,000-year-old sacrifice of the Mass. Come back and get right with Christ. And then don't be afraid. Nobody gets out alive. Nobody. Okay, so, in my particular opinion, I'd rather die trying to do something important and in service to Christ rather than in a fetal position in a corner somewhere, shaking and sweating from fear.
Mm-hmm. What else do you think Tolkien was trying to tell us through the Lord of the Rings? Any other insights that maybe he was trying to convey?
Yeah, we have to read. We have to become we have to become competent. We can't get devoured by dragons, which are the spirits of defilement, or subsumed by virtual reality, which are the Nazgul, the Black Riders. Okay, we have to cultivate our eagles. We really do. We have to become competent human beings. For every thing that we think is so great because the machine's going to do it for us, that's one skill, one piece of our competence that's chipped away and gone forever. We have to come back to our humanity. We have to, cultivate your handwriting. I wrote most of this book by hand. I resurrected my cursive writing and wrote by hand. And then thank God, my great co-author, who's probably my closest friend. I mentored him when he was young, and he's just the ultimate doer. And he actually put it in in the form that you've got. Without a lead, there wouldn't have been a real book. It still would have been up here. So we need to cultivate our handwriting, read more, get away from, kill your TV. Absolutely kill your TV. Spend more time outside. Grow a garden. Grow some of your own food. Stay away from processed food. Do not eat at McDonald's, Burger King, Arby's, Pizza Hut. None of these places. Don't do it. Stay away from big ag. Stay away from big food, and ultimately you'll stay away from big pharma. And also we have to take we obviously, what I'm saying is we have to take responsibility for our education. Don't think because you went to school, you've got an education, you've probably got a program, you've been indoctrinated, not educated. And that's the scouring of the Shire, by the way. That's what's going on there at the scouring of the Shire. They're getting rid of the John Dewey Saruman program when they come back and scour the Shire.
Deprogram.
Exactly. They have to get rid of the habits and the bad habits and Saruman, get him out. And Wormtongue, and by the way, Wormtongue is the Marxist teacher, the slave of the Marxist tyrant, John Dewey. That is the Marxist teacher. So we have to take responsibility for our education. We have to take responsibility for our personal health. Think of it as every pound of extra weight unnecessary weight that we have on us is free storage space for our masters, the tyrants that want to store toxins in us. Don't have it. Don't leave any storage for the toxins that they want in us. They want us stupid, fat, lazy, sterile, and on the way to being dead. So we have to take charge of our education, take charge of our health, and then also, and that means grow some of your own food if you can, or at least know the people who grow it and support them. And then also take charge of your finances. We really have to be in control of our finances and know where our money is spent. If you've got a 401k or you've got a retirement plan or you've got whatever, you've got money invested in something, make darn sure it's invested in something virtuous and not investing in the things that are undoing civilization.
All right. Well, Paul List, for doing all the work to write this book, I mean, the reading and the analysis of the work of Tolkien is tremendous. And for sharing it with me and for taking this interview, thank you so much.